This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. Well, my guests today, Kevin Hammonds and Kristin Bair, are an award-winning writing duo who have been working together since they were paired for their first assignment in the prestigious BMI Lehman Engel Musical Theater Workshop in 2009. In 2015, the BMI Foundation honored them with the Jerry Harrington Award for Outstanding Creative Achievement for their writing within the workshop and outside of it, including their original musical comedy, Up and Away. Up and Away, which was formerly titled Superhero, was produced as a staged reading at the Snapple Theater by the Manhattan Musical Theater Lab in November 2014. In April 2017, the Pittsburgh CLO produced a workshop of Up and Away for their inaugural Next Generation New Musicals weekend, and afterward the show was selected as the first world premiere to be developed through their Next Generation initiative. Up and Away is running from January 25th through April 15th at the Pittsburgh CLO Cabaret. In addition to Up and Away, Kevin and Kristin were commissioned for projects with U-Rock Theatricals and the New York City Children's Theater. Their short musicals The Cell and The Phobia Phobes were produced by the Prospect Theater Company as a part of their Musical Theater Lab and New York Musical Festival Summer Intensive. Other musicals include Queen with a Crown and King of Kong, both of which were developed at the BMI workshop. Kevin is also a published librettist, lyricist of numerous musicals with more than 50 productions in New York, London, and around the world. Kristin is a Pittsburgh native, and she's a composer and music director whose work has been performed in New York, Philadelphia, and now right here in Pittsburgh. Her mini-musical, Dust and Gavin's P.I., with lyricist Sarah Ziegler, was commissioned by 4 at 15 Musicals program in conjunction with UC Irvine and performed in 2016. Kristin was a book writer and lyricist and composer of Cats and Mice, a full-length family musical produced at a Philadelphia private school. So it is a great honor and a real pleasure to have the dynamic duo, I suppose that's right since we're talking about superheroes today, of Kevin Hammonds and Kristin Bair as they join me today on StoryBeat. Kristin and Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's my great pleasure. It really is. So first of all, I need to be clear. Let's be clear for the audience. Who does what? Do you both contribute to music, book, and lyrics, or how do you split your responsibilities?
I do the book and the lyrics, and Kristin does the music.
And proofreading.
Music and proofreading.
Joking.
You know, before we send out a script to any producer, I send her my final draft, and she has final draft on her computer, and she literally edits and corrects my errors and typos. Like, she is a full-on collaborator.
Do you ever correct her musical notes?
No, never. I never.
But the funny thing is, I think that's part of our partnership is that I'm into the granular stuff, and Kevin is like the genius that sees the big picture.
Big pictures and small pictures. Yeah. That makes you a very good team because you complement each other on whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah.
Would you say that's true in terms of storytelling, that you complement each other, that you have strengths and weaknesses that complement one another?
It's funny you should say that because we were up all night, or we had 2 hours of sleep, but we realized last night that we had to add this new scene in this new song, and it had to be in rehearsal this morning. So I was telling her my idea, and I was like so pumped about it, and I'm telling her, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. It's perfect. And she's like, okay, but what emotionally, what are the beats? And I was like, I don't have time for you to process this. I just need you to say if it's a good idea.
It's time to go.
Right, exactly. But he did give me 5 more minutes, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, but what she does is she forces me, because I am kind of like the big picture kind of guy. I don't think about the details, and she kind of forces me to think about it and kind of defend my thesis and explain to her why it works in each emotional beat. So she makes me be a better writer.
Well, the great Larry Gelbart once said, famously, if Hitler's still alive, I hope he's out of town with a musical. Because that's what this is, right?
It's the craziest thing, because you're in the moment and it's so wonderful. So like, we got on the set for the first time yesterday, and it was thrilling. It's just a beautiful set. And so at the same time, you're going, this is amazing. We are exhausted because writing is not just writing a musical. As you know, it's rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And, that's what we're in.
There is no such thing in writing as writing it, and there it is. It's writing and rewriting. And now the song that you wrote last night that they're going to put in today, you're still going to revise that later, probably.
It may not even pass the test. We don't know. I think are they staging it now?
3:45.
3:45. Who knows? Who knows?
And again, it opens where whenever this particular show airs or is released by StoryBeat, your show will already basically be either up and running or you're just on the verge of up and running. But the point is that this is the exciting moment. You're in the last week before the show actually.
Yeah.
And this is the first time it's ever been played in a full production. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you must be thrilled.
It's so exciting. Everything is coming together, and you see props coming in, and the costume people are there, and the set is gorgeous.
How many pieces in the orchestra, in the band?
It's the cabaret space,
yes.
So there's not a whole lot of space for instruments.
Yes.
But what we've done is actually interesting. Our orchestrators, Frank Galgano and Matt Castle, when they knew Mark Fleischer over at CLO had said, I think we can do 3 instruments. And they had, I think, a unique idea to have 2 pianos and percussion, which is not a typical orchestration. But because it's a superhero musical, there's a lot of anthemic, lush theme. I mean, the music has this sort of lushness about it. And so the sustaining properties of the pianos and the ability to be able to play with different colors. We have a grand piano and we have an upright. And it's really, the orchestrations are starting to come together, and it's been really neat. So we do. Not
an electronic keyboard or synths or anything like that?
We're all acoustic.
No. Wow.
The show is set, we say, in a simpler time, because the concept is, this is the world's first superhero before Superman, so it had to be 1930s. So, but we didn't want to be set in a specific time, so we just say a simpler time.
So this is before Schuster and Siegel thought it up.
Yeah. In fact, our 2 they're brothers, our 2 characters, their names are Joe and Jerry.
Is that on purpose?
Yeah,
that's an homage.
That's an homage.
Very nice, very nice. Well, I in my world, I come from knowing lots of comic book people. I was friends with Len Wein, who recently passed away, who created Wolverine and Swamp Thing and numerous other characters, and I'm friends. I've had on the show Marv Wolfman, who created Blade and the Teen Titans.
I heard that one.
Yeah,
that was great.
So I have a connection to this comic book world that you're in, and also I've written lots of animation that's all superhero stuff.
Oh, that's great.
So cool.
I get it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your background so we know where you come from. Specifically, what attracted you to musical theater in the first place? How did you get to here?
Do you want to go, or shall I?
Yeah, you can start.
I remember when I was, 6 years old, my sister's best friend, Sherry Havelock, if she's there, was in a production of The Sound of Music, and I think she was my babysitter, or my sister showed up at one of the rehearsals, and I was transfixed. I was like, would go to rehearsal with Sherry every day, and so ever since then, like, my stepmother introduced me to Hello Dolly, and I was just amazed from the beginning. But I started being an actor, and I moved to New York to be an actor, and I just hated the audition process. And I was so...
it's nerve-wracking.
Oh, it's terrible. It's the worst. And so I just started writing material for myself, and started to get more attention in my writing. So I was like, well, I love musical theater. Let's give this a go.
And this is around what time in your life did you make that decision, that leap?
I think around about 22.
And had you been writing prior to that?
I wrote some plays in college that were produced. I had a really great supportive drama department that kind of created a special program for me.
What school? Where were you?
I was Sam Houston State University.
Okay.
And Dr. Jim Miller was our chairman, and he kind of allowed me the possibility to develop these plays in a class and then produce them in one of the semesters. So they kind of really...
And so your background comes pretty much from the theater all along.
Yeah.
You didn't just leap into it at 22. You'd been working at it for a while.
Yeah.
And then you made the decision to start into musicals.
And then I made the decision to like take it more seriously and to start doing musicals. And we've been doing it ever since.
And I know in the intro here, you've had a lot of productions of work you've done. How many plays have you written? How many musicals have you written?
Gosh, probably about 30.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, but a lot of them are terrible.
Well, could I offer you to take a number and get in line? Because that's the way most of us write terrible.
Yeah.
You write terrible to find the great.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I worked for 25 years at a theater in Pennsylvania, in Carbondale, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And it was a tiny, non-equity, theater that called the Corner Bistro Dinner Theater. And I became really good friends with the producer, and he would just call me once a year and say, I need a murder mystery, or I need a Christmas musical. We need a Christmas musical. And so it was such a great opportunity. For 25 years, I just churned out these shows, and some of them were bad. And that's where Brenda Bly Teen Detective, which is my show that probably has had the most recognition, and it's published by Samuel French. It started at the Corner Bistro Dinner Theater as a play, and it's a Nancy Drew parody. And my collaborator at the time, Charles Miller, I went to him and said, hey, I have this show. You want to turn it into a musical? And he was the head of music at London School of Musical Theatre in London, and he's like, we need a show for the graduating students. Do you have something? And I'm like, yeah, let's do this. So then we started doing shows for the London School of Musical Theatre every year. And it was for the graduating class. We would be given, this is how many students we have. We have 15 girls and 2 guys. What can you do? And so it was kind of forcing us to really think outside of the box and try to figure out how do we use these young actresses, and how do we give them each a moment to shine. And it was just such a great training ground for writing musicals.
Well, you that's incredibly great good fortune, because you had a proving ground for yourself in which there wasn't a ton of heat on you.
None.
You weren't in that bright spotlight of New York or Los Angeles or Chicago or some place like that, or London.
Yeah.
And you got to have your version of vaudeville, essentially, where you could just try things out. If it didn't work, you could think about how would I fix it later, and that sort of thing. That's very unusual.
Yeah, it was amazing, because also we would do a show at the London School of Musical Theatre. We did a show called When Midnight Strikes. And the first time we did it, there were 24 people in it. And that's a massive cast.
Yeah.
And then 3 years later, the school did it again and allowed us to cut it down to 12. And then we did it again with 12, and we workshopped it again. And then out of that, it got a professional production, and now is published by Rodgers and Hammerstein.
You're very fortunate.
I know.
That's an amazingly wonderful training ground to do things in.
It's amazing, yeah.
It is. And Kristin, where do you come from on all this? How did you get to here? How did you get to be a musical theater person?
My path was very sort of unusual. I had played the piano since I was really young and enjoyed it. And I started being an accompanist for school musicals when I think my first one was 6th grade, and I did the Fantastics when I was in 8th grade. So I had loved musicals just from the very beginning. Sound of Music was probably the first one that I remember, the movie, and just adored it and just knew that it was a special place. In high school, I decided I wanted to get from behind the keys, and I was actually in the musicals, but music in general, because I enjoyed it so much, it seemed like, but I can't have this much fun doing something for the rest of my life.
It's not work.
It's not work, yeah. So when I went to school, I decided to go into accounting.
Accounting.
So, yeah. Again, I'm very organized and all that stuff.
Well, I guess as a composer, you're still counting.
It's math.
True.
It's all math.
It is math, yes. So I actually worked for U.S. Steel in town.
Wow.
For a couple of years, and then I got married and had kids, and I'd always kept playing the piano but didn't really do anything with it. And I became the accompanist for my kids' tiny elementary school. And they had this terrific tradition of doing 3 musicals a year with like 1st through 3rd grade, 4th through 6th grade, and then the 4 and 5-year-olds. So I sat through a couple of these musicals and I thought, I think I can maybe give this a try, even though I hadn't written anything. So I went up to the music director and I said, can I try to write a musical? And she's like, okay. Honestly, like that was what changed my life. If she would have said, nope, we're doing Annie Jr. No, thank you. But she said yes. And so I wrote this little musical called Cats and Mice. My kids were in it and a bunch of kids from the school. And I had such a good time doing it. But I knew that I really didn't know what I was doing. I had some instincts, but my scansion was off. I was misaccenting things. And I didn't have the compositional background, but I didn't know where to go next. So someone had said, there's this thing in New York called the BMI workshop. And if you audition and get in, it's free. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. And so just sent my stuff in going, sure. I got an audition. I went in with my couple of songs I ever wrote. They were animals. So I was doing the voices to the animals and everything because I was like, I'm probably not going to get in here, so I might as well enjoy myself. And I ended up, it ended up working out. I was an auditor the first year, and then the second year, I was able to audition, and they said, okay, you're in. And then Kevin and I were paired together for the very first assignment. So
that's exciting.
Yeah, it was really cool.
So that actually is a very good segue into my next question, which is let's talk about the BMI Lehman Engel, which I've not really talked about on this show, and how important it is to the musical theater in general and how many folks have come out of there. I'm friends with Jeff Marks, who came out of that same program. So I understand it, and one of the offshoots of it is New Musicals, Inc., which was the Academy for New Musicals in L.A. that I was involved in for a while. So I get the process, but I don't really know how the Lehman Engel workshops work. Can you talk us through the process that they put you through?
Sure. Well, the first year, it's this is probably not the exact number, but I think in our class there were maybe 15 lyricists and 15 composers thereabout, and a couple of lyricist composers who did both. And through the year, the moderators would get a lyricist and a composer and team them up together and have them
force you to work together.
They would say, okay, for your first assignment, Kevin Hammonds is writing with Kristin Bair, and you have to write either a happy goodbye song or a sad hello song.
Okay.
And so that was that was our parameter. And then like the next one was, okay, now you're teamed with this other person and you're writing a song for Blanche Dubois, which was a challenge.
Yeah, the assignments are purposely based on source material that should not be a musical.
Should never be a musical.
But she always depended on the kindness of strangers.
She did. Although we had to write a song in a specific scene, so we couldn't use that. But I think, there's a famous Simpsons episode where they do Streetcar the Musical.
Yeah.
And I think that was inspired. One of the writers was in the BMI workshop. And so,
I didn't know that. That's cool.
And so they kind of made fun of it. And like then we had to write a comedy song, and the source material was Angels in America.
Holy moly. Nice, light,
which is a
fluffy
barrel
stuff.
of laughs.
Yeah.
Right.
From Streetcar to Angels in America, that's all happy.
Yeah, exactly. Although there's some really funny stuff in Angels in America.
Surprisingly. But
Actually,
the interesting
funny stuff in there.
but the interesting thing is, so each assignment sort of ramps up a little bit more. And I think the third assignment, which for us was writing a charm song for A Wonderful Life, which is great. But the challenge of that one was, okay, write the song, and then now you're going to get feedback, and then you're going to do a rewrite. So, and the workshop, so the first 2 years you're in the first year and second year, and then you audition again to be in the advanced workshop. And those 2 years are not only teaching you the craft of musicals, because that's why Lehman Engel started it, because he felt that there was a craft that people were kind of, it's not a dying art, but it was important to have this foundational basis to kind of branch away from one. I mean, I should say, like, expand upon as a musician, or as a writer. But
nobody had really codified it into how this works process-wise before he came along.
Right.
And he put it into a regimen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. But a huge part of that is, and the benefit of the workshop is getting feedback and learning how to take feedback and then turn that into, oh, okay, how can this improve my song? So that's a part of the workshop that's really hugely beneficial to us, but also important as you know, feedback and critiquing is everything, really.
It's everything, because as we've already said, it's all about the revisions and the rewriting. So without that critique, you're still in the void, and the critique gives you that energy, that thought, whatever it is, to change whatever it needs to be to hopefully meet the most happy listeners.
Yeah. I mean, when you finish a song, or when I finish a song, I think, oh my God, this is perfect. This is brilliant. This is the best thing I've ever written.
I love it.
And then
don't have to touch a
don't
word.
touch a thing. And then you get it in front of people, and they make comments, and you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And it's when I'm writing with Kristin, I love to tell the story because I'll send something to her, think, this is it. I can't wait to hear her response or hear her praise me, how brilliant I am. And she'll write back and she'll say, I love where this is going. And when I read something like that, I'm like,
you're
here we
cooked.
go.
It's time for more work.
And I have this arc of, she just doesn't get it. Why doesn't she get it? She's so frustrating. Okay, fine, I'll think about it. Well, okay, maybe. That's probably, she's a genius. And I go through this whole, transformation of thought that I hate her and then I love her because she's so smart.
It's what are the 7 stages of grief?
It is. It absolutely is.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm going to say this for 2 seconds and I'm going to be done, but I'm in the middle of writing a musical right now and have all the same issues that you're talking about, where we just did a reading of it in December. It turned out, lots of issues that came up and a lot of things that need reworking. And so it's frustrating. You think this is going to be great, and it isn't.
And it isn't.
So, and you know what? I have a very dear friend of mine who invented the porta potty and the cruise control. And one of his favorite phrases is, there's nothing like the unmistakable sledgehammer of the marketplace. And so you can put your perfect product out in the world and the marketplace will go smash, and that's the end of that.
Right.
So you're going to have, one way or another, you're going to find out here shortly how good your piece is up and away at the CLO Cabaret, because you're going to get reviewed. The reviewers here are very generous, which is a nice thing, and I think that you're going to do very well, and the audiences will tell you. Mm-hmm. And that marketplace is absolutely critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so now how often, when you're at the BMI Lehman Engel, how often do you meet as a group?
Once a week.
Once a week.
Yeah. Once a week.
So now, Kristin, you live in Philly, right? Mm-hmm. So do you commute into New York?
I do. I have a really understanding husband who was able to take care of my kids when I was up in New York. Because one way, it's about 2.5 hours.
Right.
So it's just this side of not crazy.
Do you go up and go back, or do you stay overnight?
I go up and go back, actually.
Wow.
So it's a long day for me. But again, the benefits of doing it are absolutely amazing.
Understandable. So you're willing to make that sacrifice, and that sacrifice is sort of everything. If you aren't willing to make that sacrifice, you just lose.
Absolutely.
Right? So you have to. And Kevin, you live in New York, so it's a basic commute for you.
Yeah, it's fine. And it's funny. I started BMI because I'd been writing with Charles Miller in London, and I had moderate success in London, but I didn't have any writers in New York, and so I'm like, I'm going to start BMI so I can meet a New York composer, and then the person I meet lives in Philadelphia. I can't win.
Well, it would only have been better if you'd met a person in London and had just moved to New York.
Exactly.
That would have really killed you. But
I would have stunk.
so now, once you're a member of the BMI workshop, you are a member of the BMI workshop, right?
Well, technically, you're in it for 2 years. So the first year, they give us all these assignments, and there are about 8 of them altogether.
I think so.
You have to do a suicide song for Willie Loman. And then your final project is a 10-minute musical of your choosing. And then the second year, you have to pick a collaborator to work with the entire year on one project. And after the second year, at the end of the second year...
A full length?
Yeah.
Full length.
You don't have to finish it or write the whole thing, but you have to pick something. And they suggest an adaptation that may not even be available. But something.
So in other words, rights aren't available necessarily.
Yeah. And they say, you can use it as a business card. And we did. We chose King of Kong, which is a documentary.
Yeah. I've seen it.
It's a brilliant documentary.
Great.
I've seen it.
So we chose that. she and I, for our second year. And then so in the end of the second year, you present a 20-minute presentation. And based on that presentation, you're accepted into advanced, or you're very kindly released back into the ocean.
Into the void.
Yeah.
But the whole year you're working on songs for that project. So you will have already gotten feedback on
Sure.
the songs. And so it's kind of what you do with that feedback and what you take, so it's not like you come into the presentation and they're like, wow, this is new material. They know what you've done, but they also know the process that you've gone through to get to that.
Well, they're at that point familiar with you, and you're familiar with
Yeah.
what it is that they're looking for.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do you ever find that the feedback you're getting actually takes you down the wrong road?
Oh, yes, all the time.
Because, in the first and in the second year, I guess, the people in the room, which are your people that are in your grade or whatever
Your
your
peers.
year, and then the moderators, they know your project so well. And when you get into advanced, people, because they're working on projects themselves, or we're out of town, so we haven't been to the advanced workshop for a while, but they don't have as much of a familiarity. And like when you don't know the project intimately, you try to give a summary and a setup, but sometimes they're like, oh, well, you should be doing this. And sometimes we are able to say, like, okay, but they really don't know what we're doing. But sometimes we're like, well, that might be a good idea. And then, oops, it ends up. And I'm not blaming anyone, but just trying to keep an open mind. Like, that's an approach we haven't tried.
Well, if they're not familiar with the work, intimately familiar with the work, then frequently they may make assumptions that aren't true.
Yeah. And, when you're in advance, like when we were in the first 2 years, it's kind of like going back to college. You're with this small group of people, and you're in this experience for the first time together, and it's a really incredible bonding experience. Like, I have so many dear friends from BMI now that
I'm sure you do.
It's been amazing. But when you go into advanced, there are people in there that have been there for 10, 20 years. And
Is
so,
that right?
Yeah. Because it's once you're in advance, you're kind of in for life unless you
But as long
don't
as you
present.
participate,
Yeah.
you need to present a couple times a year, and you need to be there to support your fellow
Your
classmates.
peers,
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
And do you see people come through who have made really good in the world and are still using it as a way to try things out?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sarah Wordsworth.
Sarah
and
Wordsworth, who wrote
Kristen
the book
Anderson
for In
Lopez.
Transit. And also in advance, our moderators are, like, when we get back in February, it's Lynn Ahrens,
Maury Yeston.
Maury Yeston.
I just
Maltby.
met Lynn Ahrens, which was a great thrill.
She's
she's
lovely.
my favorite. She's my idol.
Oh my gosh.
She's. I was at the at Ken Davenport Super Conference in New York
Oh, yeah.
in November.
Yeah.
I was. I gave a seminar there, and she was on stage before, and so I got a chance to meet her. That was a thrill.
She's so nice.
And then went to see Once on This Island, which is a really amazing production.
Oh, my God. Don't get me started. I love
haven't
that
seen
show.
it yet. He saw.
I saw the
it's great.
original 24 times.
Oh my goodness!
24 times. And I would get standing room for $10. And I would see Lynn Ahrens and Stephen, back in the lobby talking about changes. And that really, I said to her when I first met her in BMI, I'm like, you taught me how to write musicals. Because I just went there every chance I got to kind of study the form and kind of, learn what they're doing, what changes they were making. And so meeting her in BMI was like a dream come true. I adore her.
And have you actually worked with her? Has she given you critique?
Yeah, she
Yes.
has.
Mhm.
She has.
Yeah, she's heard us present it. Some of the songs from our current show and some of our songs from King of Kong.
And from King of Kong.
Mm-hmm.
And is King of Kong complete? Is it finished? Is it ready for production?
You want to tell the story?
Every writer has a story about the one that got away.
Oh, yes.
That's the one
Yeah, we were in contact with the executive producers and
of the documentary.
And New Line Cinemas had optioned the rights to make a fictional movie out of the documentary,
Okay.
which is a little bit of a head scratcher to begin with. But the option was going
I
to.
can see it. I got it.
Yeah, it was
Well,
supposed
I
to
mean,
be for Ben Stiller, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
what
Yeah.
they said.
Yeah. And who was there was yes. So the option was going to expire like 2 weeks before we were giving our presentation. They're like, yeah, we really like your stuff. This is really great. And then New Line decided to re-up. So that
like,
was
"Sorry,
that.
can't do
Yeah. And so we let that dream go.
I would say to you, with all due respect, just wait.
That's what I've been telling Kristen. I'm like, just wait. I'm like,
Because
"Just
if you
wait."
have something in your hip pocket and you've already done a lot of thought and work on it, it may come back around again.
But here's the catch.
Yeah, here there's a complication.
Michael Friedman, who wrote Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, and what else did he write?
Just something recently, but he was head of City Center Encores.
Okay.
And he just passed away.
Brilliant
Yes.
composer, lyricist.
Really
right?
great.
Yes, yes.
When
yes.
he passed away, in his obituary in the New York Times, it said that he had just finished a Broadway production, a Broadway musical of King of Kong.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's been through a reading already. So somehow he got through to
So
people.
he
and
got the rights, but
He's,
we
he's
didn't.
slightly more
Well, that puts
famous than we
a
are.
difficult wrinkle into the matter.
Yeah, it does.
Well, he's more famous now.
He is.
Yes,
he
that's
is.
true.
That's true. So we're just gonna continue to sit on it. It's such a great story.
It is a great story.
Larger than life characters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something that is relatable to young people in some way, which is a good thing because the theater needs an infusion of young people in it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You know, it keeps getting older. Okay, so let's talk about your actual working process. When you get an idea, and have you done stuff that's just wholly original, like you're making it up all by yourself, or have you always just done adaptations of things?
Most of my stuff has been original stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, and Up and Away is original.
Up and Away is
and
original.
Up and Away is original.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I haven't seen it. I look forward to seeing it. I'll come see it.
Yay.
But when you say it's original, the story's original, but you're basing it on an existing thing in the world called a superhero.
Yeah, we're basing it on a specific genre, but it's about the world's
But the
very
characters are
first
all
superhero.
unique.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so when you get an original idea, where do you like to start? Do you start with character, story? Where do you begin?
I start with, well, first I run it by Kristin and and get her approval.
Well, I mean, we decide that we like something.
Yeah, we decide that we're going to work on something, and I
Wouldn't make much sense to work on something that she didn't like.
exactly. There'd be no point. I love working from an outline, and I won't write a bit of dialogue or a lyric until both Kristin and I have, combed over an outline and signed off on it.
You know, I'm so glad you're saying this. You know what that story's going to be, hook, line, and sinker, before you begin to actually put
Before I write a word.
story, the whole thing together. I shouldn't say story,
Yeah.
libretto, music, and so on.
Yeah, I think, it's like, I liken it to, I would never go into a kitchen and just start throwing ingredients into a bowl and not think about what I'm making.
That's a very good analogy.
It would be terrible.
do you think? Okay, so I'll go back a little bit, back again, which is it character first or plot first? Do you come up with a story? It's like the concept. Oh, I've got a superhero story, but I don't know who the superheroes are.
I get kind of a long log line, for lack of a better word, where I go, okay, our musical's gonna be about the world's very first superhero.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna explore how the superhero tropes came into existence. Why does a modern day superhero, how did Superman know that a cape would help him fly? We're gonna answer that question in our musical.
Got it.
How did they come about to think that they needed an alter ego? Like, if I had a superhero power, wouldn't I be very proud of it and tell everyone, hey guys, I can fly? Why did all the superheroes think they needed to keep their identity secret?
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the show we're writing. So based on that kind of log line, then I'll go, okay, so what do I need? I need a Superman type character because he's the most iconic. And then I need a villain, and I need, so I kind of start building from characters about what I need to tell that story. And I also knew that I wanted to do a 5-person musical where all the characters played many different parts.
Got it.
Kind of a 39 steps treatment to it.
Sure.
So then I just, I build from the characters, and I build. I really love the hero's journey, the writer's journey, Christopher Vogel.
Christopher Vogler, yeah.
And I kind of start with that. And I don't do the, full-on treatment, but I'll do the 12 steps of writer's journey where I'll say, okay, first of all, what does our hero want? What does our central character want? And then I can start building the hero's journey based on that.
Mm-hmm.
So he needs a mentor. I think step 3 of the hero's journey is meeting a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
So who's his mentor? Oh, he needs a mentor. In the superhero world, there's always that mentor, the man in the chair that kind of aids him and directs him.
Sure.
So who's that? So then I develop that character, and then I can kind of build it out through there.
So you're following a classic paradigm.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's also good to hear because as a teacher, sometimes it's hard to convince younger minds that the classic paradigm is is functional for virtually every story you can think of.
It is so functional. I get so frustrated when people say, "Oh, it boxes you in. It's so formulaic." It's not. I can go anywhere.
All it is you're meeting certain milestones that the audience recognizes as you're being told a story, and it has nothing to do with boxing you in whatsoever.
Nothing whatsoever.
So, all right. So, which then comes first once you've got the outline? Lyrics or music?
Usually, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so at BMI, they stress that the very first song you should actually write has to do with what does the hero want? It's the I want song.
Good.
And that's what we also learn in, was that the Blanche song? Maybe it was a Blanche song in there. We learn about that, and that's where the heart of your story is, because that's what you really have to know. So we actually, our process mostly is we talk about the moment, and then it usually is lyrics first. Occasionally I will come up with something small, or he'll come up with a certain amount. I'll be like, okay, maybe this could be the bridge. But for the most part, I work from his lyrics because I'm sort of granular. I'm like, okay, well, now how is he feeling at this moment? And what's he, so and sometimes, and he's actually quite fast. So he can be like, okay, this is what I think. And I mean, it goes through plenty of revisions and that sort of thing.
Before
but we start
you've written
from
a
that.
note? Or do you have a musical theme going?
Sometimes if we're thinking, well, it's kind of, I don't know if you feel this way, but sometimes I feel like, okay, I'm not really sure where it comes from. It's just all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's the right thing.
If you study genius and you study creative people, which I've done a lifetime of doing, what you quickly learn is that almost all great creators say that they're not responsible for what they're doing, that it's coming through them, that they're a conduit. It's a bolt out of the blue. It's coming from God. It's coming from heaven, whatever. You'll hear all these things, and that they are not the actual generators of the idea, that something else is happening. So when you say that, no, that's not surprising at all.
Yeah, it's crazy. But so we work through that, and with this musical, we started with a song that is kind of motiffically all over, if that's a word, all over.
Motiffically.
Well, listen to us.
I know. Look at that.
Guess what? You now have a word for a song, motiffically.
How do you rhyme motiffically?
With terrifically.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're
there
right.
we got it.
Specifically.
Motiffically
is terrific.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
There are
I'm putting
motifs.
that in the show.
But anyway, so we started, and I kind of had the groove of that because
Is that what's a fella good for?
Yeah, because we knew that there were brothers who lived in the country, so I kind of developed that.
It had a feeling. You had a feeling for it.
I did, and I,
But did you? I'm still trying to get it, and maybe you don't know the exact answer, and that's okay. Did you then have music that you then set words to, or did you sit down and write verse, chorus, etc., and that turned into a full song? Or is it all one?
I mean, normally I write the lyrics first, but I'm thinking that you came up with the dun 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 dun.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, we kind of did it hand in hand because the whole concept is, our character Joe lives on a farm, and he wants to be great. He wants to move to big city and live the high life in New York City. And
he's the superhero.
He's a superhero. He becomes a superhero, and
because he feels that there's some sort of greatness inside him.
Does he have powers already?
No, he doesn't. But he feels like hasn't found his place in the world, and he feels like he has greatness waiting to burst. So he wants to go somewhere where he can let it out.
Got it.
And then he gets superhuman powers, and then he's like, now I have to go to big city because I have to show them what I can do. Because, once again, there's never been a superhero before him, so he doesn't know to keep it a secret. He wants to go to big city and say, hey, guys, look what I can do. So then he goes to New York City. So, I mean, not New York City, big city.
The big city, not
Big
Gotham.
No, it's called Big City.
Not Metropolis, just big city.
Big city.
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
He lives in Farm Town, and he goes to big city.
Okay.
So I think you came up. I think we knew that we wanted him. So, he wants to find his place in the world is basically his want. And then we're going to tell a story about how he either finds it or he doesn't. And that's what the entire show is about. His brother, who's there with him, is very nervous and very scared of his own shadow. And so his want, he also has a want of he wants to protect his brother at all cost. Even though he's fearful, he loves his brother so much that he sets his fear aside and kind of protects his brother whenever he can. So he's forced to go to big city also. And so it's the story about them and the adventures that they experience when they're in big city. So we knew that Joe had to sing about wanting to be great. And then we stumbled upon this saying of what's a fella good for if he can't be great? And that's where we started. And then you came up with a musical motif for that.
Wouldn't you say that's the majority of humanity?
It is, and that's the theme of our show: the struggle between goodness and greatness.
Wow.
And what is the difference?
And that's going to touch virtually everybody, because everybody has had that thought at one time or another that they could be great if they aren't already. And I think a lot of great people don't think they are.
Yeah.
And so everybody's always striving for that thing, whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
So I actually need to step back a half a step. So do you write the play, the book, whatever you want to call it? Do you write the book before you start to you've got the outline, right? Do you then write the play?
Well, the process usually is I do a brief hero's journey on it, and then I do a save the cat on it, and then I do a backwards and forward on it. That's my obsessive outline. Like, I want to cover every beat. So by the time the outline is done...
You actually applied Save the Cat...
I apply Save the Cat...
to musicals.
I do. I totally do.
It works. It totally works.
Of course it works.
You know, I don't do...
It's the 7 plot points with 8 more.
Yeah.
In between.
Yeah. And I don't do, the entire hero's journey and the entire Save the Cat. But I kind of take from both, and I kind of, backwards and forwards?
I don't know backwards and forwards. That's one I don't know.
Can you explain it? Because I know how to do it, but it's basically, it's the concept of and you probably know this. This is so elementary, but it's so I forget so quickly that every beat is a result from the previous beat.
Sure.
If I put down a gun, either you pick it up, and then if you pick it up, then you shoot. So every single beat. So and if you go backwards, you can pinpoint the reaction from each.
Oh, I see.
And the
Well,
motivations
that
as
makes
well.
sense.
Yeah. So I do that too. So if I know if there's a moment in the outline that seems lacking and that kind of doesn't have any energy,
it's got no connection.
It has no connection to the one before.
Yeah. Okay.
So once I've done all of that, and this is weeks and months.
Yeah.
And it's her taking it and her.
And by the way, I've done that my whole career without knowing it was called that.
Oh, it's great.
You just go back. You start sometimes, when you write a mystery, you start at the rear. What's my result?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to work your way toward where you're going to come to the result.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And then once we've settled on that, then we'll both start from the beginning of the show. We won't write the opening number.
Yeah, that's...
We were taught in BMI not to write the opening
you're not
number.
in the same city. How do you work? Do you other than when you're together, when you're Kristin, when you're in New York, do you work on the phone? Do you work on Skype? How do you get together?
Email.
We really do a lot of email. In fact, it's so dumb because sometimes we actually waste time, right? Well, I do. Waste time writing emails where it's like, oh, yeah, you could just pick up the phone. But the hilarious thing is being here because we're so used to, well, you can tell them.
Well, we're staying at the William Penn Omni,
Yes,
and we
beautiful.
came beautiful, gorgeous.
Oh my gosh,
I told
amazing.
Kristin, I'm like, do not get used to this. This is not normal. We're not always going to be put up in a 5-star hotel. And we were here for 2 weeks in October, doing a workshop of the show. And I'm in my hotel room. She's in her hotel room. We're completely used to writing individually. And I'm sitting there working, and I get a text from her. She's like, hey, what do you think about this? And I call her. I'm like, you realize we're on the same floor. Why are you texting me? We're in the same hotel. But we're so used to it. I don't think we've never written a song together.
Oh,
in the
we
same
have
room.
a whole generation right now. I teach 18 to 22-year-olds. We have an entire generation that will sit next to each other and text each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
That's what they do now.
Mm-hmm.
Literally next to
Yeah.
each other. It's like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we've never written a song in the same room. Ever.
You've never written a song in the same
Nope,
room?
No.
Never.
No.
So you're very used to not being in the same room. Or when you're sitting in the theater now in rehearsal, is it different for you since you're not used to that?
No, because we're in rehearsal, the director can't turn to us and say, give me a new song now. So they'll usually, after rehearsal, she'll say, okay, this needs to be fixed. And then we'll talk about it over dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll go to our separate hotel rooms. And like last night, I went to my hotel after I got the sign off for Kristin. I went to my hotel room. I wrote it, and then I sent it to Kristin, and then she took over.
That's amazing.
But I think
It feels
geography.
it feels very Gilbert and Sullivan-esque.
Does it?
But you know what? Actually, I should say when we work this way, as I'm working through, I make a ton of recordings. So I'll either record like an idea I have, or I'll record like his lyrics to what I've come up with. And so we do a lot of. It's not we're not writing in vacuums as much as it sounds like. There's a lot of going back and forth. Yeah. So, but we're just not like, it's not like the Sherman Brothers that we're going, hey, 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 around a piano. That's not us.
How did the Sherman Brothers?
Yeah, how does it? Is that from the history book?
That was like, some sort of chimney. Anyway.
I will have you know that I wrote 4 musicals with Frank Wildhorn. Mm-hmm. All 4 of them were written side by side in the same room.
Really?
The last 2 were with me literally standing at the nose end of his grand piano.
Wow.
That's a very pretty picture.
No, it isn't.
No, it isn't.
That's really cool. And this is partially on me. Like he comes up with lyrics very quickly. With me, again, we've described me several times now, but I'm not an improviser. I like to think about things, and if I
I understand where you're coming from. And in fact, my world would have been better back then had it been more like yours, where you actually can step back and not feel the pressure of the person staring at you across the way.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens is the two of you are staring at each other and you don't have an answer and you're thinking, I must be an idiot, but I'm not, and I just have to think about it for a while and then I'll get it.
Right.
And you go home and, oh yeah, there it is, and off you go to the races.
Yeah. Like I always say, when I used to work with Charles Miller, and we used to work in the same room, and he would write a verse, and then he'd wait for me to come up with lyrics, but I'm like, that verse is going to be repeated 3 times. I have to come up with 3 different sets of lyrics. You're done. I have much more work to do.
Yeah, that's right. And how often, once you've finished a song, the writing of the dialogue, such that it is, that's entirely on you, right, Kevin?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I assume you put your 2 cents in, Kristen.
Oh, I occasionally come up with little echoes, like, but I mean, it's mostly him. But he does take lyric suggestions.
Okay, so the that would make sense since you're writing the music and things may not quite fit as perfectly as you need them to. So you're going to make those adjustments as well. But how frequently, once you've got a song complete where you think it's good, before someone has come to you and said, you know what, you ought to change this or that, how frequently do you go off for a day or 2 and you go, you know what, let's make this change? Does that happen frequently?
That does happen a few times. Not too often.
Yeah. It's more like... it's hard to say because, for example, there's a song, our sort of, I don't know, is it an 11 o'clock number? Save the World?
Yeah.
So we knew in this current musical that there was a song that had to take place, and we were here for the workshop, and Van Kaplan, in his wonderful way that he pinpoints problems, says, yeah, that song's not working. We're like, oh.
You need a new song there.
Yeah, you really do.
Van's been around the block more than once.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's really smart.
He's really smart. We're like, yeah, he's right. But so the process to get to the song that we currently had took us, we wrote, now this was October. So we wrote between October and the first week of December, I think we wrote 3 different versions of songs, 2 of which had different lyrics.
With notes or on your own?
On our own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was,
yes.
And it was kind of like I sent her the lyrics, and then she put it to music, and then I was like, I don't think this is it. And it wasn't her music, it was the combination of both.
Right.
I was like, I think I just completely led you down the wrong path. And sometimes you don't know that until you hear it put to music.
Of course not.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We have written our share of songs you're like, but you have to, sometimes you really have to write the bad song to get to the good one.
Oh, listen, if they were all winners, you wouldn't be sitting here. You'd be whisking yourself around the world right now. So that's the way it works. You have to go through trial and error and do this, that, and the other thing in order to get to the next step. I don't know if you've ever heard Stephen Schwartz talk about the writing of Wicked, but he was here in Pittsburgh a year and a half ago, whenever it might have been 2 years ago, I can't remember. But he was here, and I went and heard him speak, and he went through the description of the creation of Wicked and how many productions they did of it, where they kept taking songs out and putting songs in and rearranging the way that the story worked, and it took them a long time to get Wicked right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And obviously they've done okay with it since. But
it's okay. Yeah, they've done okay with that.
Yeah. First $1 billion show in one theater. How does that work?
I think it's going to do okay.
But it's also interesting. We can get songs and a script to the point where it's, oh, okay, this feels really good. Then you add actors and a director, and
Changes
all of a sudden
everything.
you go, oh, wait, that doesn't work. And they bring so much to the process, and we've been so thrilled with the actors in Pittsburgh. Our cast is amazing.
We have some spectacular talent here in Pittsburgh.
Really do.
Really, truly great professional first-class talent right here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is your experience, and how do you work with a director? Are you expecting the director to help you, to guide you in text or story or any of that, or are you just expecting them to take your work and run with it?
No, Marlo Hunter is our director and choreographer, and she's like an integral part of this collaboration. She did our first reading in New York, and ever since she's been on board. And so we will send her a new draft, and she will, give us her notes. And she's been really so useful and great with the story and the characters, and saying she's very particular and she's very detail oriented. And as we know, I am not. So she'll be like, well, why does he say that? And I'll be like, well, because he needs to get off stage. Well, I know that, but why does the character do that? And I have to defend it. She's great. She's been with us for the past 3 years.
Yeah, but the funny thing is
that right? She's been on the same show with you for 3 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
But we've, up till this point, as you know from the reading and the workshop processes, it's mostly behind music stands and with binders,
Sure,
with a script in it. And so we were kind of saying, like, wow, it'll be interesting. Like maybe Marla will be like, we're joking.
Hope
saying,
she can
like,
direct
yeah.
without
Exactly.
music stands.
without music stands.
No, maybe we've seen her work. We knew she was amazing, but we were like, oh, this will be like, and it's
She's
been
amazing.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
And we're such a tight group, the three of us. Like we all three love each other so much, and we're really close friends, and we trust each other so well. And that she will, last night we spent the evening like talking, her giving me pointers on the scene, me giving her pointers on the number. Was it last week? Like 2 weeks ago, she was choreographing a number, and Kristin and I were her actors. And we were on stage with her, giving her, so we all trust each other. And, Marlo has, and I'll talk about this later, but Marlo has a great philosophy in the rehearsal room, is the best idea wins.
Well, it's a good philosophy.
It's a good one.
It also requires you to be egoless.
Yep. Absolutely.
But I think for all good collaborations, you have to be, because if the goal is we want to have a great show, you have to be that way and say, and that song doesn't work, it's out of there. It's not like, oh, I love that song. I mean, of course, the little tiny part of our heart goes, oh, well, I like that song, but you got to do it.
So in music, it's not uncommon to have a song that you've written, and this part of the song works very well, and this part of the song does not. Do you find that comes up frequently?
Well, it's interesting you say that.
Came up last night.
Well, yes, that was one thing. But we have, it's a superhero musical, so we have lots of villains. And we have one song where we've been trying different villains in those spots. So I have everything with its modulations and everything. And then, oh, yeah, we're taking that villain out. We need new music, and it needs to like all wind up in the same place. So it's, it's challenging, but it's also, that's kind of fun too, because you have to figure out, okay, it's like a math problem. Like, how do I get into this key from this key and still have the music I want? So yeah, but again, it's like we take apart the script, we take apart the lyrics, we take apart the music.
Because curiously, the process of putting words to music, which you don't have to do. Obviously, you can have just words or just music. We have that all the time. But when you meld the two of them together, they become a third thing. This thing called a song. And the interesting thing to me is it's, at least in my mind, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's once you have the music the way the music needs to be, and you figured it out. Oh, that's a great piece of music. The words are easier to change. You can actually change a word more readily than you can change the notes. Yes?
I think so. I mean, as a lyricist, I'll often say, she'll put something to my lyrics, and I'll go, that word doesn't work for me now, but I'm just going to leave it until the song is more in my bones, until I, and then once I know the tune, I can much easier write the lyrics.
I would assume once you've written the music with the lyrics, you now have the rhythm and the syncopation and all that in your head that you might not have had when you wrote the lyrics.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you might have written lyrics that you have a rough time getting your head wrapped around musically, Kristin, in terms of how do I put music to these words because of the way that they're laid out on paper.
Yeah, you would think that would happen more often than it does, but Kevin has such a great sense of, even though he's not a musician per
But he
se,
has a
but
musical thinking.
he does. He has a really great sense of rhythm and how.
I would think so at this point. You would be a natural at that. It's just what you do.
Yeah.
Definitely. But it's funny how occasionally, if he'll send me something and I'll hear it set in a certain rhythm, and then I'll send him something and be like, okay, that's interesting. It just isn't how I, imagined it. And so it's funny. It seems like it would be so obvious, but occasionally it's like subject to interpretation.
Do you ever set out to write a specific tone, genre, whatever you want to call it? So we want to write a song that's in the same rhythm and the same flavor as Maria from West Side Story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you do think that way.
I'll say to her, if I'm sending her a lyric, I'll say this. I always say, this is like Waiting for Life from Once on This Island. Like, I'll give her a specific song from a show.
So then you know what the tone that he has in his head.
That is very helpful. It is. But it's funny. Like, I think, just for example, I'm a huge West Side Story fan.
Okay.
And I love the writing in there. And I can relate almost every song I've written to a place or a piece of music in that show. But you would never listen to one of my songs and be like, oh, yeah, that sounds just like West Side Story. But it's nice to have, for the tone and the feel, sometimes the rhythm, it is nice to have a reference.
Well,
I never knew that about you. That's interesting.
You're learning things every day.
Well, you're not writing in a vacuum. There is an entire history of music, words, musicals, Broadway musicals in specific. You're not writing in a vacuum, and you are, as the phrase goes, you're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
And so you're in a way you're paying homage to comic book characters. You're probably paying homage to musicals that have had comic book characters in them, because there have been a few.
Yeah, yeah.
There's been more than one superhero. I mean, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark.
Yes.
I just had Patrick Page in here, sitting right here.
Oh,
just a few
really?
weeks ago.
Yes, I did see that.
So
That's right.
that's Patrick Page, who played the Green Goblin in Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark.
And did you talk about it?
Oh, of course.
Oh, good. I can't wait.
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Hasn't been released yet.
Yeah.
It's coming. But and he and his wife Paige Davis were both here at the same time.
Because I think
nice.
CLO had that on their website or maybe on Twitter or something. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yes,
Yeah.
Patrick and Paige, fantastic. So, anyway, we're coming toward the end of the show. So
That was fast.
yeah, well, that's a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good thing. Do you each and individually or together? Do you have any particular story that you can relate to the audience that's either kind of funny or quirky or oddball or weird, or something that's happened to you in show business that people can go, oh, that's kind of offbeat?
I think he has a great story, so I'm going to let him field this one.
I do. I was doing a 2-person musical that I'd written with Charles Miller, and it was called Lost in New York, and it was about a family from, I think, Wisconsin. I don't know where. Their plane got, they had to lay over in New York City, and their teenage daughter runs out because she wants to be a Broadway star. She runs into Manhattan, and the family chases after her. So all the family members get lost separately in New York City, and it's about all their adventures. And it's played by 2 men. All the characters are 2 men. It's kind of like Greater Tuna,
Okay.
where they're, it's just 2 men, and it's
And they play lots of characters.
lots of characters, really quick costume changes, and it's just about their adventures in New York. And me and Rob Misko from the Corner Bistro Dinner Theater did it there. And then we got booked at the Caesars Casino in the Poconos. So we're doing the show.
Were you looking for the booking? Were you looking for a booking, or did it just happen?
He found it somehow. He just always finds these bookings. So it wasn't a big show. It was like a piano and a drum, and I think we did it for a few weeks, and it was a tough show to do, obviously, with 2 people.
Sure. Lots of work.
So we're backstage. We're getting ready to go on, and our piano player doesn't show up.
Uh-oh.
And we're texting him or we're calling him, and he doesn't show up. 30 minutes later, he calls and says, I'm an hour and a half away. I'm not coming. My car's broken down. I can't get there in time.
Oh, my goodness.
So we go to the house manager, and we're like, well, we can't do the show. Our piano player's not here. And she's like, you have to do the show.
The show must go on.
The show must go on.
Always.
They booked these tour groups, these bus tours that come in. There's an audience full of people waiting to see a show.
Who will destroy the theater if
Exactly.
you don't.
You have to do the show. And we didn't have a piano player. And so I turned to Rob. I'm like, okay, here we go. We're going to, whenever there's a song, turn it into a monologue. Just act it. acted as a monologue. Because the songs are there to mask costume changes. So, I would leave the stage as Maria, and while he's singing a song, I was changing into Rex, or another character. So the songs masked the costume changes.
So they had to be there.
So we just turned them into these monologues. And it wasn't like, okay, let me write it out for you. It was, let's go, turn that into a monologue.
Oh my gosh.
And it was a 2-hour, 2-act musical that we performed as a play.
Oh, that's hilarious.
2 people. And it was terrifying, the most terrifying experience I've ever had on stage. We finished. There was a producer from Florida in the audience who came up afterwards and wanted to book the show. Until he found out it was a musical. Then he didn't want to do it.
He had no interest in it.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Well, why didn't you take the gig and do it as a non-musical?
Well, he turned out to be a charlatan anyway, so I don't know how serious he was about
You
it.
weren't going anywhere.
Exactly.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And did it throw you to not be singing, like you couldn't remember certain words?
It was. I mean, we didn't just speak the words. I told him, I'm like, don't just recite the lyrics as words. Just talk about the feeling. If the song was, about being scared, just say, what am I going to do? I don't know what to do. And Rob Misko is one of my best friends, and he's a genius. And we did the producers together. We did The Odd Couple together. So we have a relationship on stage that's so comfortable anyway. Like, he's the only person in the world I could have done that with.
So are you still I'm off where I normally go here, but are you still an actor? Do you still perform?
No, not really.
And very briefly, do you sing your own stuff when you do demos? Do you hire demo people?
No, not for the demos. Like, I'll sing in BMI if we're presenting something, but I wouldn't be on a demo.
So you have a presentable voice.
Ish.
I would think you have a nice voice.
Well, thank you. But it's not. I wouldn't make a living as a singer, but it's fine.
But it's more than passable. They can understand that you hit
Definitely.
the notes and all this.
Yeah. Leo Bloom from producers, I can do that. I can't do Jean Valjean.
Okay, and so do you have, for those who are trying to make their way, trying to get to where you are, where you're clearly right at that, you're trying to get to that next big hurdle? Do you have any advice or tips that would help someone to get, down the road into some form of success?
I think we touched on this already, but I think the most valuable thing that I learned is to listen to people, listen to your collaborators, listen to the people that are in the room, because no matter what, we're not doing this in a vacuum. We have an audience. We're trying to do something that people enjoy. And if you are rejecting feedback from whether it's writers or people who are seeing it, you're not going to have your best show. So you've got to just tell yourself, okay, what do I think that I'm presenting in a really cool way that they're just not getting? Instead of saying, like, why don't they like me? Why don't they like this song? What's wrong with me? To say, like, how can I get them on how can I get them on my ride to understand? And I think that's a way to kind of frame it in your head, so it's not feeling so personal, but it's like exciting. Like, how am I going to figure this out? Because the BMI workshop and our work at CLO have been invaluable to, and even like Marlo and Olivia O'Connor, who's working at CLO and has been our dramaturg, they have come up with great suggestions that Kevin and I have not come up with. And we, like I said, we've gotten rid of songs, and it's because we listen and we say, okay, let's try to see what we can do with this feedback. So it's hard to put yourself out there, and I would encourage people to put yourself out there, get your stuff out, and have people actually like see it and react to it. It's hard because you don't want to be hurt. You want it to be like a special thing, but it's the best thing for you as a writer.
I think that's just spectacularly valuable advice. It's very hard for most writers who have put their heart and soul into something, and to have someone say, no, that's not working in any way, shape, or form, or it stinks, or it really needs fixed, or get rid of it, or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's just terrific advice. And when I see students who don't want to make changes, it always makes me scratch my head. So I thank you for saying that. Mm-hmm. It's very valuable. And Kevin Hammonds, Kristin Bair, thank you for coming on StoryBeat today. It's been absolutely a pleasure to have you here.
It's been a ball. Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.
Today's StoryBeat tip. Despite what many people believe, being the hero of a story is not an enviable position in which to find oneself. The hero will face more struggle and pain than most people should ever have to bear. Much in his or her life will be sacrificed, perhaps even life itself, as he or she may test death. It is not unusual for a hero to save the day, but in the end lay down his or her own life. Above and beyond the physical challenges, a hero must also come to terms with himself or herself. In other words, they must change and grow in some profound way. The audience must identify with the hero throughout this process, or else they will rapidly lose interest. The hero is responsible for most of the story's action. Heroes take the biggest risks, and sometimes, but not always, reap the rewards, which he or she is likely to share with others. Heroes are more often than not reluctant to enter the fray because no person in their right mind would want to rush into such dangerous situations. Most often, the hero has no choice but to fight. In other words, he or she is forced into difficult circumstances. But heroes don't usually become involved on a whim. Unforgettable heroes usually stand for something. Heroes generally must find a good reason to enter the fray, and most often it is precisely because they find that they have no choice but to stand up for something. And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a comment on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great episodes to you. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.